The issue isn't subsidies, although we're talking about that right now. We're trying to figure out whether we have unmet needs. That's what this hearing is about. And I can tell you that my district is replete with unmet transportation needs. But what I'll also tell you, and this is where Tom and I may have some common ground, is that those needs are not being met by the current arrangement, and yet we spend a great deal of money on it. So I'm wondering what our options are in changing the way we respond to those needs. I know that these funds are, and I'm saying this primarily for our CSAC presence here, but the construct for this consideration is absurd. And the limitations for rural counties are extreme. If we could spend the same amount of money on a system of, we talked about Hong Kong. I'm not talking about jitneys here, but my view is you could replace this empty running fleet with small vehicles with 50 mile per gallon or 40 mile per gallon capacity, costing 1/10 of what a small bus would cost, and you could have those running all over Calaveras all the time and getting people where they need, both in a regular schedule but also on a dial-a-ride basis. The problem is that the funding arrangement does not mitigate toward that, and we don't have the possibilities of doing what we know we could do if given half a chance to structure it, not to some abstract urban model, but one that actually meets the needs and distances and the logistical challenges of our region. And I wonder why our legislators have got us trying to win a triathlon in a straitjacket on transportation in rural counties. But I also want to say something else on this, because it's something I feel very strongly about. To say that students can get where they need to go, or could before we did this environmental plot on people, is a little missing the point. My folks in my district, some towns get now faced with 26.8% unemployment, often do not have the financial wherewithal to get where they need to go. And the question I have for all of you and people who might be listening to this is, when we talk about subsidies for special needs kids in school, or when we talk about the need for health care, or for that matter, we subsidize almost 100% national defense. So there's something we might want to look at, but not everything pays for itself. And in rural counties, we don't have the structure to be able to accomplish things that may be important to fundamental function of a civilization. The ability to move goods and services and people is essential to a democracy. And yet we disenfranchise people sometimes by this whole question of, really, are we all in it together, or do you folks way out there, or you folks who are really poor, are you out of the picture? And it worries me, having hearing some of the arguments rekindled about social Darwinism. Let's have the people who can get there survive and get educated, and let's have the people who can't. You're on your own, suckers. Reminds me of sort of a Lord of the Flies concept about civilization. Are we in it together, or are we not? And if we are we going to do things efficiently? Are we going to stop having this, 20-some-year argument, or are we going to start fighting, using our organizations to have some kind of response to true rural needs and have a better chance to use the money we have, whatever subsidy we might be able to get a hold of, which is precious little actually in this county. But let's just suggest that maybe we should all agree that an efficient model of delivery is not an urban-based model, but something very different that we could do here ourselves with some combination of public and private effort and some ability to do things in smaller vehicles that are more efficient with flexible responses to real and established need. And that's all I have to say on it, but I'm deeply saddened by our hamster wheel discussion. Lots of running and no ground gained. Let's do this differently. I have great faith, as does Tom, in Jamie's competence and good work ethic and effort to make this go. But we have put her in a straitjacket trying to win the transportation triathlon, and I'm very anxious that our governmental partners in Sacramento begin to hear this message a little stronger and give her a chance to do what we know she could do if we could just take the wrap off.
Mr. Spellman, it's the board's turn. Mr. Cofanelli, do you have any comments?
No.
As a member of the board, when Mr. Stein was on it, I did support the ridership program. I don't believe there should be a litmus test to who takes the bus and whether it's students or seniors or disabled. I have a lot of constituents in the Evetts Pass corridor who take the bus, who go to school, and I remember Ms. Azevan coming to us, and or maybe it was at the Council of Governments, as the price of gas went up, the ridership increased, so the challenge became to keep those people on the bus even when the price of gas went from $4 to $3. We have discussed dial-a-ride programs. We've discussed the reducing the size of the buses. That's all part of the equation that Public Works is responsible for in the management of the bus system. And I think Steve and Tom were right that it is in good hands, and we appreciate the work that you're doing, and not only for people like Supervisor Tryon, but for the public who are our riders. Thank you. So if there's no, Mr. Fry, I've closed the public comment period. If there is no
dispensation that the other two parties.
Sorry, too bad. There's no more public. I'll talk to you afterwards. There's no more public comment. This agenda item is closed. I would like to move to the next item. As a courtesy to the district attorney's office staff and to our clerk recorder, Karen Varney, I am going to start with county council first.
Thank you. Actually, I have two things I wanted to talk about. The first one has to do with the current vacancy in the district attorney's office. I've given each of you copies of 3 code sections. I've also handed these out to the representatives of the press. There's a few extra available at the podium. I'm sure he's aware. There are really 3 questions involved in this issue. The first one is what happens to Jeff Tuttle's current term of office, which runs from now until January 3rd of 2011. The second question centers on what happens at the primary in June. And then the third question has to do with what happens with the new term commencing next January. So I wanted to talk about each of those 3 items and then answer questions. And we also will need some board direction on the first question. The Government Code Section 26542 provides that in the event of a vacancy in the district attorney's office, the chief deputy takes over the office, has all of the same authority and the same obligations as the district attorney. Barbara Yook is aware of this. She's taken over control of the office and is currently operating it as provided by the section on a temporary basis. I didn't give you the section, but there's another provision in the government code which clearly says that it's the Board of Supervisors that has the authority, is the appointing authority to fill a vacancy in this office, as in most county offices. So one of the questions that I think the board needs to address and give us direction on is when and how do you want to exercise that authority? The office is currently in the hands of Barbara Yook. There are about 8 months left in the term, and so the question is, would the board want to consider appointing a replacement to fill the vacancy? Would the board want to do that now? Would the board want to do that after the June primary, which may have an effect on that decision? And if the board wants to make the appointment, what sort of process do you want to go through? Do you want to advertise for the job? Do you want to do interviews? Which in turn then, by the time all that is done, really has an effect on what will be the balance of the current term of office that you'll be filling. So that's before the day's out. I would hope that we could get some direction from the board as to what you'd prefer to do. One of the options is to do nothing and leave matters as they currently are until January.
Well, may I ask, do you want to go through it all, or may I ask a question?
I don't care if you do.
Well, it seems to me that that the board should leave Barbara in charge at least until the June primary. And it's my understanding from speaking to you that which is your next section you talk about, is that people can file until May 13th as a write-in candidate for that office. Now, if some write-in candidate won, then it would seem to me to make sense to appoint that person to fill the position. If no write-in candidate wins, and in order to win, they have to get more votes than Jeff, because Jeff's name will remain on the ballot even though he's deceased, which I think is highly unlikely, but is a possibility, depending on who the writing candidate or candidates would be. And then if the board were to, I guess going on to your third one here, if the board were to fill the position, it says that position shall only remain filled by the board until the next regularly scheduled election. So if the board were to, I guess my question is, if the board, if Jeff were to win in June, get the most votes, because his name's on the ballot, and the board were to appoint somebody, would that office be back on the ballot in November, because that's the next regularly scheduled election after the primary? Or would it be the next regularly scheduled election after his term of office is up?
Okay. Actually, Karen Varney's here because she and I have really been participating in this process and sorting out what needs to happen, and she may be able to fill in some of the issues. I think you're correct about the write-in candidacy. I think that window closes 14 days before the primary. So I think the date you mentioned is not correct. But
okay.
We currently are in the window now.
That's the date you gave me. That's all right.
I said 14 days before the primary election. So let me just the other point you make about waiting until after the June primary actually makes sense to me, but it's the board's call, not mine.
And then how about the next regularly scheduled election?
The only thing you can do is make an appointment for the balance of this term. So if you do that, again, it's entirely up to you. Come January, you'll have to, and you want to make another appointment, it'll have to be made again.
But it doesn't go back on the ballot in November, because that would be the next regularly scheduled election.
No, because it's the next regularly scheduled election after the term begins, after January of 2011.
Okay, that's my question.
So you've sort of anticipated most of it. I think what I was going to say, yes. The elections code section, which is the next one I've given you, addresses the very specific situation. I'm not sure that it's ever happened. I haven't been able to find any other county where it's happened, but it addresses a situation where the incumbent dies in office less than 68 days before the primary, which is what has happened here. Under that circumstance, this election code provision is very clear. The election proceeds, the votes are counted, and if that individual, the deceased individual, gets a majority of the votes cast for the office, that person's declared the winner, and then you go on to address what happens in January at the beginning of the new term. If there's a write-in candidacy, then that could all change, all right? A successful write-in candidate would be elected, would take over the office next January, and all of this would be moot.
Would we be able to appoint that person after the primary if they won?
Yes.
For the remainder of this term, and then...
Who you appoint is going to be, who and how you go about it is entirely up to the authority of the board. But, of course, that might be one reason for waiting until after the primary. So I think I covered it. In January, the office, assuming that Jeff wins the primary, then the office would be deemed again vacant on January 3rd. The board is directed by the government code to have the office filled at the next regularly scheduled election. That's not the next general election. It's not a special election. It's the next regularly scheduled election. And I think Karen needs to tell us when that would be.
June 2011.
The next regularly scheduled election would be, in our county, would be November of 2011. We have
2011?
We have an election that's scheduled 2011. So if, and the way I interpret it to be the next regularly scheduled election for the jurisdiction. So for our county, that would be November 11th of 2011. And just as clarification, the write-in period started April 12th and ends on May 25th.
May 25th.
Could you repeat that, please, Karen? April 12th for what?
Through the 25th for the write-in period.
Okay.
25th.
So, assuming all of this happens, this would then go on the ballot in the November 2011 election, and that person would take office as of the date that the election results are declared. If there's an appointment made, the person between January 3rd and the date that the election is decided in November, that person would leave the office. And the person elected would then serve the balance of the term, dated back to January, so that their term would end along with all the other elected officials in the county.
Are there any questions of Karen or Jim? Does the district attorney's office have any questions they'd like, or comments they'd like to make? Does the public have any comments they'd like to make? Could you please come up?
Darren Spellman, Rancho Calaveras. I'm just sticking my hand up so I don't come up to the mic and
You
get denied.
just come up.
Okay.
It's fine.
Super. So I just want clarification. You said if you had any questions. So if the deceased gets the most votes, then the Board of Supervisors would make an appointment of someone to fill that office until the end of the current term, which is January of 2011. And then they would have the opportunity to also make another appointment for the same or a different person until the next regularly scheduled election, which is November of 2011.
I think they're two separate questions. Right now, the board has the authority to appoint someone to fill the term from this day forward until the end of the term, which is January.
Got it.
Then in January, the board will once again be called upon to consider appointing someone for the next term until the election takes place.
In the event that there's no write-in candidate that gets a majority vote.
I'm sorry?
In the event that there's no write-in candidate who gets a majority of the vote in June.
That's correct.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments or questions? Go ahead, Jim.
Well, just to go back, now or at some fairly soon, near date, I think the board needs to tell staff, how do you always like to proceed on the issue of filling the office?
I guess the first question would be number one, what is the pleasure of the board? Do we want to appoint the deputy now or wait until after June 8th? Russ?
Well, as I understand it, Ms. Yook has assumed the duties.
Correct.
Okay, so that doesn't take any action from now until June, is that correct?
Take any.
Okay, that would be my recommendation. Let's see how things shake out after June 8th.
Mr. Tuffanelli?
I feel the same way.
Mr. Linsky?
However unlikely it might be, I think people of Calaveras County have the right to make a decision if that's what they decide to do in relation to this election. I agree with my two colleagues.
As do I. I think it should be rescheduled for further evaluation after the primary.
Okay.
I'm not saying I'm for appointing anybody, but I just think that's the appropriate time to review it.
I do too. This is really very difficult because it was the board who appointed Mr. Tuttle to the position, his first
Jeff was
his
initially
first
appointed by the
time
board.
that he was the district attorney. So I feel like this is sort of deja vu. I agree with my colleagues, so Mr. Jones, this will come back to the board after the June 8th primary.
Okay. I have one other item, if I, since I've got, I'm on a roll.
Since you're on the roll.
This, one of the public service announcement, a couple of days ago, I saw this article in the New York Times that says 1/4 of nonprofits are to lose tax breaks. I'm not giving tax advice by any means, but apparently the rules have changed, and that nonprofits, previously nonprofits who with revenues of less than $25,000 weren't filing returns. And they've changed the rules, with the result that if you go for 3 years without filing, and now there's no limit. It's all nonprofits. If they go for 3 years without filing a return, they lose their tax-free status. I know that there are a lot of 501c3s in the county. The county does business with a lot of them, and I know that they don't have big staffs or accountants, but this would be this could be a big deal if I think if the nonprofits in the county lost that status. So I thought I'd put it out there that you should really talk to an accountant about this and see what you need to do if you're involved in a nonprofit.
Do we have the capability of notifying our county nonprofits of this change?
I don't know of any registry of
I'm
that.
sure they would have got some type of notification.
We hope.
We hope, yeah.
But,
Well, Congress did it. Congress isn't notifying anybody.
yeah.
I'll tell you that for sure.
Well, if there is any kind of roster, or at least the ones that we're dealing with, it might be a courtesy to get that article out.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Well, since we're
Really,
starting with
newspapers that at least publish it,
Ms.
so
Boyce, I'll go to you next.
Okay, a couple of things. I just want to remind the board, if you have not nominated your senior persons of the year, nominations are due to the senior center by May the 5th. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. The other thing is I've scheduled some tentative study sessions for May. And May 4th, we have the follow-up for the federal legislative county priority projects and discussion as to whether or not the board wishes to enter into contracts with governmental relations firms. May 11th, we will not have any study sessions because 2 members of the board will be in Washington, D.C. On May the 18th, we're tentatively scheduling a session with the Parks and Recreation Commission. They've requested a study session to talk about the master plan update, some of the governance and financing issues. And then on May the 25th, the Auditor, Controller, and Human Resources Director are going to present to you new laws regarding our General Accounting Standards Board, Statement 45, and other post-employment benefits. We need some direction from the board in terms of implementation, which impacts our financial statements and how we budget. And finally, our annual review of county fees. So I just wanted to check with the board if this schedule is okay with you. We'll go ahead and inform department heads.
My concern about the financing issue for Park and Recs, Are they going to be lobbying us for money at this point in time?
No,
Or requesting, it's just they're going to be talking about it? Because I don't want to have it,
It's not a lobbying for budget money, but I think they're going
Okay.
to talk about what governance structure might exist, such as setting up a special district or not.
They were due back, actually, part of their work task was to report back to the Board of Supervisors once they had concepts for how to fund Parks and Rec and what structures would, governance structures would best mitigate toward them being able to raise their own funds. So that's, I would expect that the master plan, which is a requirement to create any kind of organization, is the main topic of discussion.
Yes, absolutely. And they had wanted to do this on the 11th. I asked them if we could move it to the 18th because of the board's going to Washington. So they're checking with their membership. So far, it looks like that date will work for them. If it doesn't, I'll let you know.
okay, thank you. That means,
One more thing, just to remind you all, and this is really for the departments who may be listening also. May 11th is our annual county government frog jump date. So for folks that are here, this is a fundraiser that the proceeds go to the Humane Society. And we'd like departments to enter their frogs and reserve that noontime date to join us.
so
Thank you. That's it.
I'd like the board to please think of a name, so, for the board's frog. Mr. Tryon, do you have anything?
I did attend an RCRC meeting, and last week there wasn't really a lot new in it. I think everybody's waiting for the May revise at this point before they're keeping their powder dry. It was, to me, it was sort of rehashing a lot of old issues that are still on the burner and are probably not going to get resolved in my lifetime, since they haven't been resolved in my 26 years on the board, whether it be Forest Practices Act or water or whatever. We've never resolved any of them in my 23 years on the RCRC or thereabouts. But one issue did come up, and I thought I'd just comment on it, and along with the fact that we are going to have to revisit the solid waste fees. But under recycling and solid waste management measures, the Air Resources Control Board adopted the landfill methane control measure in June 2009. Of the state's overall 367 municipal solid waste landfills, the Air Resources Board has identified 14 uncontrolled municipal solid waste landfills which could possibly be required to design and install new gas collection and emission control systems by 2012. The Air Resources Board control list includes the following RCRC counties: Calaveras, Glen, Imperial Lake, and Shasta. So when we do the fees, we're going to have to incorporate also what those costs are going to be. And I'm sure Tom is aware of it, and I'm sure Tom is calculating what that will be. But we are in the line of fire of the Air Resource Control Board, and you'll probably be, I would suspect you'll be looking at substantial fines or something if we don't meet those deadlines. So I don't know that for a fact, but most of the Air Resource Board stuff has a big hammer that goes with it. So that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Walensky.
I have a special meeting of the Mother Lode Job Training Board on Wednesday, tomorrow at 2:30 in Frog Hollow. I'll be addressing the 4-H poultry project in West Point that night. I'm meeting at Mother Lode Job Training again on the 29th, Thursday, in Sonora. I'm attending the multi-jurisdictional meeting at the hospital boardroom on Friday. I also have a couple of pieces of correspondence which I found of note, and I'd like to share those. The first is an article that appeared in the Sacramento Bee, which takes the viewpoint that the state's water planning should begin at the source. We've had a lot of discussions about water, and as the representative for the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, that's been sort of front and center issue. It has been remarkable who's in the room when California water policy is discussed. Generally speaking, you'll see major players from Southern California water agencies. You'll see legislators perhaps from Los Angeles and the Bay Area with a representative or two in the Central Valley. And the discussion goes between the urban areas and the Central Valley, because the urban areas actually still are of the belief that their water comes from the Central Valley. This is left out the counties of origin. 65% of the water in California comes from the Sierra Nevada, and there's not one single representative in the rooms where the decisions have been made in promulgating or even formulating the latest water policy initiatives. It's important that representatives from the Sierra region begin to enter the discussion in a way that may change at least a little bit of the thinking. The Sierra provides this water based on the snowpack, based on the condition of the forests and the meadows in the upcountry, and it's kind of acts like a sponge. It goes into our limestone fissures and fractured rock, and gradually is released down into ultimately the rivers. How we steward this area affects millions of people downstream, and yet we're not even at the table. So the people downstream think that the way they get water is by building dams and doing engineering projects. If you take the production of the Sierra and the variables of fire, the either success or failure of stewardship projects, the restoration of upcountry springs and stream area, riparian areas, that adds more water or subtracts more water than all the dams in California combined. So the voice of the Sierra, unless it is much more robust than it is, and unless we break our way into the rooms in which these discussions are being held, will ultimately continue to rely on heroic engineering projects without taking into account the bulk of the water, where it comes from, and how quality and quantity are affected by activities on the land. So toward that end, I'll be addressing the Aqua conference a week and a half from now with the idea that the great dialogue between the valley and the populated coast that party needs to be crashed by representatives of our region. Secondly, I got a communication from titled Poverty Hunger Fact Sheet, and would note for the record that Calaveras County had the highest increase in food stamps since 2007 in the state of California, nearly double the next one down. San Joaquin actually is at 27%. We're at 67% increase over that time. Before people get overly alarmed that we are more starving than our surrounding counties, actually the bulk of that stat has been created by the existence of the community service centers in all 5 of our districts, where people can access, make known their needs and access benefits that are their right without having to drive long distances to San Andreas. And so that changed it balanced out. It looked for a long time as if District 1 was where the food need was. As it turns out, that's the people who live closest to the Cal Works office. So our success has also created a statistical anomaly, which is that at least people know that they don't have to starve, that there are programs that can at least provide some small safety net. And that's all I had to report.
Mr. Tuffanelli.
I have no board duties to report this week, but I do have a piece of correspondence that came in my mail. It's a blood drive in Valley Springs area, actually in Valley Springs. It's sponsored by Mother Lode Council of the Knights of Columbia. It's Tuesday, May 25th, from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. And there'll be 2 blood mobiles in the parking lot at Valley Springs Fitness Center. That's on Magley Way and Highway 26. It says walk-ins welcome and childcare available. It says drawings for meals and golf from La Quintana Golf Course and Grill and coffee from Jitters. It says bring a photo ID and eat and drink before donating. So I expect to see everybody in here there and everybody watching on PEG TV to go in and give blood at Valley Springs on the 25th of
Jeannie
May.
said she'd go twice.
And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Mr. Thomas.
2 arms, right?
Okay, on a couple of things on correspondence. Well, before I get to that, I'm concerned about losing momentum on the noise ordinance. You talked about the study session schedule, but do you have any idea when the noise ordinance is scheduled to be back in front of us?
No, I know they're working on it to get it back as soon as possible, so I'll check with them.
Okay, well,
I know it's a high priority for them as well.
Yeah, we literally can't get involved in our holiday weekends without having some tools. Okay. I don't know whether other folks on the board saw this letter from Brian Moss responding to San Joaquin County Mosquito and Vector Control District that thanks but no thanks. We're not going to have a program.
Oh, that's the one he talked about when he was here at board. And he said we asked him to respond to that.
Right.
But I'm,
That's a good example of when the state starts funding something and then takes the money away. And absent a special district to self-fund it, there isn't funding.
Yeah, they don't have the money to do it.
okay, well, I have some local concerns in my district. We attract a lot of people to the Coppertown Square for events throughout the beginning about now when the weather changes, and there's a very much of a prime habitat for mosquitoes right adjacent to it in that creek drainage on both sides. We've had the ability to mitigate the mosquito problems in the past. I really want to bring it to Brian's attention and to you folks that we can't let ourselves get vulnerable, or expose the populations to the hordes of mosquitoes that might come flying out of there. Okay, that's that. There is a volunteer appreciation dinner for the Humane Society that I wanted to talk about that is on Thursday night. It's a buffet dinner with beverage, tri-tip pasta, and roasted asparagus, garlic mashed potatoes. Anyway, this event is going to be at the San Andreas Town Hall on Church Street near the corner of Highway 49. The person to talk contact about this event is Mary Pons, and she can be reached at 772-8882. And on that same subject of the Humane Society, I've been honored by an invitation to perform for the first fundraising performance of a fundraising event for the Humane Society's effort to do a shelter, an animal shelter in the county. And that event is going to be on the afternoon of May 8th at the Vets Hall in Valley Springs. It'll be from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. So people are encouraged to go to the powwow in the morning and come listen to the Mountain Melody. It's a wonderful group of ladies that sing throughout Calaveras County and beyond, but they've asked me to sing with them this year, so I'm very pleased about that. Okay, now on the board responsibilities here, let's see. There is an important meeting with the Fish and Game tomorrow evening, Fish and Game Commission. There will be a presentation on the planting, the dilemma that we have in the planting the upper streams and lakes. I have some other obligations. I won't be able to go to that, but if anybody has any interest in that particular decision about where the Fish and Game has decided that they cannot allow planting, and they've restricted our ability to plant as well. Okay, on some events in the district, there's a Copperopolis car show at the Coppertown Center on Saturday morning, or actually throughout the day, culminating in the evening with a nice dance. And I also want to remind people that might be listening that there is a candidates forum where the sheriff's candidates and the District 5 candidates will be subjecting themselves to questions and answers at the Rancho Calaveras Clubhouse. That's from 2 to 4 on Sunday afternoon. So anyway, come one and come all. That concludes my report this morning. Thank you.
I will be at Fish and Game Commission Wednesday night. I'm the representative. I will be at the Humane Society's event on Thursday. We have the Kids Fishing Clinic this Saturday from 8 to 1. And I'll be at a function at the Arnold Library later that afternoon. And Saturday night, I went to Relay for Life. I don't know how many of you went. This year it was different because there's AstroTurf in the center of the field, so all the booths and fun were over at the side closer to the ballpark at Bret Harte High School. It was much more intense to walk around the track with the luminaires without all the excitement and activities that go on in the center of the ball field, the football field. I saw new names there, and I saw names of people we honor. It was not better or worse this year. It was just a different experience, but I guess I encourage everyone not to forget the Relay for Life when it happens every year. Tom, there's a function at the Angels Museum for Bret Harte this Wednesday at 5:30, so you might want to go. I have Fish and Game, so I'm not going to be able to be there.
That's the opening of the Mark Twain.
Yes, opening of the Mark Twain.
Wednesday when?
5:30 at the museum.
I forgot about that.
Steve and I are on the Central Sierra Child Support Agency, and we discussed at our meeting last week, having Tuolumne County enter into, and Steve and I have discussed this with you before, into the Joint Powers Authority of Central Sierra, so it would be Alpine, Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne. The JPA agreement, Joint Powers Agreement, will have to be rewritten. Steve and I are supportive of doing this, and Tuolumne is supportive of joining. There's just issues that need to be worked out, similar to when we first started the JPA, and then when we had the excitement of moving the Calaveras office over to Amador, but Steve and a member from Amador board on the working committee, but I just wanted to keep you informed on that. Oh, yeah.
I'd like to actually add a couple of notes on this. It appears that the state, having taken a look at the JPA that we initiated, which includes Amador, Alpine, and ourselves, that it's created efficiencies. We've been able to actually overall reduce staff and costs and upgrade 2 out of the 3 counties' performance in the course of this in terms of results collections of funds that are due for child support. The state, having seen that, is likely to be consolidating or encouraging consolidations in their ideas of what should be the partners. And it's our goal to try to make sure that our JPA is strong enough and large enough and has the economies of scale enough so that we'll be determining our own fate with a contiguous group of counties that share both demographics and sort of continuity of geography. So Tuolumne is an obvious addition. They are larger than the rest of us. They come with, they are rated 3rd in the state out of 58 counties, so their director has achieved a great deal of acclaim, especially for a rural county. To be number 3 in the state is considered almost defying the laws of physics and certainly geography. So that partnership seems a good one to explore. The current arrangement with the JPA is to have each group go back to its board and let people know that we're considering this and that there may be a proposal negotiated over some period of time that would come back and need your ratification and after review. So this is not something that is expected immediately. There's no decision that's been made, but it is an exploration that is currently underway and has some legs.
And they come with money.
Oh, yes, that's the other nice thing.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? This meeting stands in recess, and we will be going into closed session. Thank you.
Carol? Will you submit that for me? It's all finished.